It's time to tackle the story for my branch of the Open Waste, given that I want other people to make their own branches of the project. I threw a whole lot of ideas onto a page and attempted to format them in terms of setting, story, and game mechanics, as practiced by YouTube mentor and legendary father of Fallout, Tim Cain himself. Oh yes. So here's the setting, or the elevator pitch if you like. This is going to be an open source Fallout for the people, by the people. But you could say that about the entire project, not just my particular branch of it. So a little more specifically, it's about the bleak joy of exploring the wasteland and underground refuges, which is one of the great underpinnings of the Fallout series. But my branch also attempts to answer the question, what would happen if nuclear activity were to open rifts in space and time, causing people and entities to enter the post-apocalyptic world from other realities? So that's a very broad overview of the setting, at least. When it came to untangling story from game mechanics, I had a slightly harder time, but maybe that's no bad thing that they're so intermeshed. This is all very much at the draft stage, and I'd very much welcome feedback on the idea. The player falls into the post-apocalyptic world via one of these rifts between realities. The rift stays open long enough that the player can turn around and see that their world is a paradise in comparison to the post-apocalyptic world into which they've emerged. So it becomes obvious that the goal for the player is to get back to their own world and their own home. Some of the first things the player may encounter are this world survivors of the apocalypse that's already happened. They may encounter bandits or raiders, which are the classic two-dimensional villains, but they may well be a source of weapons and supplies. A third cast of characters I've called Gribblies, and more on those in a bit. So to talk about the survivors, they can be friendly. They built their refuges after the bombs, so there's a little difference there between refuges and vaults. Refuges are more cobbled together and less pristine than the Vault-Tec vaults. But like the vaults, the refuges are all underground, and that's because the surface is too radioactive. Nuclear winter means there's not enough sunlight for farming, although the player may encounter solar panels attached to buildings because there's enough solar energy still available for it to be useful to the refuges. And so their survivors come out every so often and harvest that energy. And of course, there's far too many raiders on the surface, and it's far safer for the survivors to lock themselves away underground. So to talk about the Gribblies, these are from other realities as well. They too have fallen through rifts between realities. They're outlandish in appearance. They have non-lootable weapon attacks, much like the bull squid and the Vortigaunt from the Half-Life series. Some are aggressive and will attack the player and survivors on sight. However, some are ultra shy and avoid contact wherever possible. An artifact the player may come across are empties, and this is something I've stolen from the brothers Strugatsky Roadside Picnic, upon which the Stalker series is based. I don't think the Stalker series used empties as the Strugatsky brothers describe them in the book Roadside Picnic. I have to admit, I've never played Stalker. So the empties are two copper plates held parallel at constant distance by an invisible force. The player can learn from survivors that empties can be filled with soul energy from downed Gribblies. And when I say soul energy, I mean SOL, like the sun, as opposed to soul or spirit, however you want to interpret that word. Armed with an empty and the knowledge of what it's used for and how, the player can see soul energy above a killed enemy and can collect it in their empty or empties if they have a collection of them. Soul energy is a universal currency, particularly in the refuges, where, for example, it's used to power lights for underground farms. And the unit of that currency is the cal, which is short for calorie. It may be that the player starts to hunt Gribblies for this energy, and the Gribblies tend to be concentrated in more radioactive areas where the bombs detonated during the apocalypse, because this is where the rifts occur between the different worlds. The more Gribblies the player kills, the tougher the future Gribblies are that come through the corresponding rift. That may be great for the player because the tougher the Gribbly killed, the greater the amount of soul energy it gives off when it dies. However, this all has a negative effect on nearby refuges because they're unable to cope with the tougher enemies and their steady supply of soul energy starts to dwindle. And kind of on that note, the territory of the various factions, so whether that's the survivors, the raiders, the Gribblies, can expand and contract and much of that is influenced by the player character's actions. The player can also encounter rival outsiders, and by outsiders I mean any entity that's fallen through a rift into this post-apocalyptic world. Most of them are simply not suited to this harsh environment, and they die pretty much straight away. Some are from different time periods. Some are from what we would call the medieval period. Some are from fairly contemporary, modern eras. But some are from very, very futuristic eras. And with their know-how and any technology they happen to have on them at the time they fell through the rift, they can end up leading raider gangs or even take over entire refuges. However, these futuristic outsiders can also be a source of technology which the player can use to get back home, which is the main goal, whether or not those outsiders are hostile or more friendly. So it's always been about getting home, and to wrap up the story thread, I've thought of two possible routes. A potential relatively good route is that the player is able to earn the trust of some of the less warlike, some of the shyer Gribblies. These will help the player character open a new rift to the player's home using their, i.e. the Gribblies, their know-how, local resources, and maybe some obscure artifacts dropped by other species of Gribbly. So what are some of the challenges the player might have to overcome to achieve this? Well, first, the language barrier will have to be overcome. Maybe there's some sort of device the player either has to develop or find before they can even speak to the Gribblies. Maybe the Gribblies could learn how to send messages via a refugee's computer terminal, one of the few remaining computers still working in this post-apocalyptic world. And here's a bad or evil ending. The PC can cause their own rift in space-time by finding an unexploded warhead from the apocalypse, somehow getting the atomic device out of the warhead and then taking it to a specific location and altitude where they detonate it in just the right way to cause a rift that will take them home. The pros of this idea are that it's a fairly unambiguously evil ending. But some of the cons include questions like, well, is this arguably harder to achieve than the good ending? And if so, why would an evil player even bother to do it? How does the player character find out where to place the device? Because that implies cooperation with an entity that knows what they're talking about, which is kind of hard to do if you've killed many of their number. And it's also likely that the device from the warhead would be extremely heavy. So there's the question of how the player would simply carry it from the warhead to where it needs to be detonated. So that's the story so far. And as I said at the start of the video, all of this is open to interpretation, discussion, being pulled apart, ridiculed, critiqued, hopefully in a nice way, in the comments section below. The next video will be very much a return to the hard mechanics of scripting and building the open wastes, and it will be all about my progress with navigation meshes and the generation of them at runtime. If you're enjoying following the progress of this project, I made references to navigation meshes in this previous video. Clickable.